Hey guys, welcome to this video on sentence structure. In this video, we'll learn about the different types of sentences so you can make sure your writing is interesting and engaging to the reader. Listen to this paragraph. Daniel went to the grocery store. He wasn't sure if it had any more fresh apples. The store did not have any apples. Daniel was very sad. Apples are Daniel's favorite food. How did this paragraph sound to you? Monotonous, boring, and uninteresting, right? How about this version? Daniel went to the grocery store, but he wasn't sure if it had any more fresh apples. Much to his dismay, the store did not have any apples, and Daniel was distraught. After all, apples are Daniel's favorite food. Sounds a lot better, right? While there are many differences between these two paragraphs, the main difference is that the first used the same simple type of sentence throughout, while the second used many different types of sentences in order to enhance the content. The first type of sentence we're going to look at is a simple sentence, which consists of both a subject and predicate and can stand independently as its own sentence. A simple sentence is essentially the same thing as an independent clause. Let's look at an example. The old car survived the drive across the country despite the weather conditions. There's only one independent clause with the subject, the old car, and the predicate, survived the drive across the country despite the weather conditions. Let's move on to the second type of sentence, compound sentences. A compound sentence consists of two independent clauses joined together by a conjunction. Here's an example. Max drove to the store and Ben picked up the grills. Note that there are two independent clauses here that could stand alone as sentences. You could just as easily write, Max drove to the store. Ben picked up the grills. But we've joined these two independent clauses together by using the conjunction and. Another example would be, with all the heavy traffic, Josh was able to get home in time for dinner, but Ariana was stuck on the busy freeway. The first independent clause is, Josh was able to get home in time for dinner. And the second is, Ariana was stuck on the busy freeway. The two clauses are joined by the conjunction but. The beginning of the sentence, with all the heavy traffic, is a prepositional phrase and does not have any bearing on this type of sentence. The third type of sentence is a complex sentence, which consists of one independent clause with the addition of one or more dependent clauses. Let's look at an example. After she took the time to clean her room, Sarah could finally play with her new dollhouse. The first part of the sentence, after she took the time to clean her room, is a dependent clause. More information is needed for it to serve as its own independent sentence. The second part of the sentence, Sarah could finally play with her new dollhouse, is an independent clause because it has a subject and predicate and can stand alone as a sentence. The last type of sentence is a compound complex sentence. This type of sentence contains two independent clauses as well as a dependent clause. An example would look something like this. Before the treehouse is used for the first time, all the beams need to be checked and the ladder must be connected. The two independent clauses are, all the beams need to be checked and the ladder must be connected. They are combined using the conjunction and. The start of the sentence, before the treehouse is used for the first time, is a dependent clause since it has a subject, the treehouse, and a predicate, is used for the first time, but cannot stand independently as its own sentence. Today, we're going to be talking about subject-verb agreement. We've talked before about what a subject is and what a verb is, but as a quick reminder, the subject of the sentence is the person or thing performing an action, and the verb is the word describing the action state or occurrence of the subject. Subjects and verbs have to agree with one another in number. That means that if a subject is singular, the verb used with it must also be singular. Just so, if a subject is plural, the verb must be plural. Let's unpack that. Singular means just one of the person, animal, or thing that the noun refers to. For example, a single dog, train, or man. Plural means multiple of the person, animal, or thing in question. For example, multiple dogs, trains, or men. Take a look at the following sentence and try to determine whether or not it has proper subject-verb agreement. The dog chased the cat. Does something feel off with that sentence? Well, you're right. Dog is singular, but the verb chase is actually a plural verb. In the present tense, nouns and verbs form plurals in opposite ways. Nouns add an S when they are plural, and verbs remove an S. Conversely, if a noun is singular, it drops the S, and if a verb is singular, it needs an S. So this sentence should actually read, the dog chases the cat, or the dogs chase the cat. What if it gets a little bit more complicated? What if you have a sentence like this? She and her friends are at the fair. The verb in this sentence is the word are, which is a plural verb used with plural nouns such as the fish are swimming or the eggs are hatching. But as you can see, we have two subjects in this sentence, she and her friends. When the subject of the sentence is made up of two or more nouns connected by the word and, you always use a plural verb. Think of it this way. The and lumps the two subjects into a group, making them a multiple, which would then be plural. Now, what if the two subjects are joined by something other than the word and? Say the word or, for example. Take a look at this sentence. The book or the pen is in the drawer. The word or tells us that it's not both things together that we're talking about. It's one or the other. Since both book and pen are singular nouns, we should use the singular verb is, not the plural are. Using a plural verb in a situation like this is a common mistake. Just remember, when two or more singular nouns are connected by the word or, always use a singular verb. Let's take a look at one more fun complication. The boy or his friends run every day. In this sentence, the two subjects are joined by the word or, but one of them is singular, boy, and one of them is plural, friends. How do you choose which of these to match with a verb? It's easy, actually. When a compound subject contains both a singular and a plural noun or pronoun joined by or, the verb just agrees with the part of the subject that is closest to it. So in the sentence we looked at, we used run, the plural form of the verb, because friends is plural. If we rearrange the sentence, we would have to change the verb as follows. His friends or the boy runs every day. Don't be misled by phrases that come between the subject and the verb. The verb has to agree with the subject, remember? Well, sometimes other pronouns or nouns can look like they are the subject, and then it gets tricky. For example, why does the following sentence use a singular verb instead of a plural one? One of the boxes is open. The subject isn't boxes, even though the word boxes does happen to be closest to the verb. The subject is one, and one is singular. What about this one? The team captain, as well as his players, is anxious. Should you make the verb agree with captain, which is singular, or players, which is plural? Well, since you see the word is, you already know the answer. The subject is the team captain, so the verb has to be singular. The part of the sentence about the players is parenthetical and not the subject. To recap, it's important to make sure your subject and verb agree. That just means that if you have a plural subject, you have to use a plural verb, and if you have a singular subject, you have to use a singular verb.
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. This silly sentence contains all of the letters of the alphabet, and you might notice it also is stuffed full of adjectives. In this video, we'll talk about what adjectives are and how to use them in a sentence. An adjective is a word that describes a noun. It describes something's size, color, age, origin, material, or shape. Adjectives can be used to make the subject simpler to understand and to shed light on what an author wants their ideas to truly convey. The adjectives used in the sentence about the fox and the dog are quick and brown, describing the fox, and lazy, which describes the dog. Here's another example. She is the smartest student in the class. Student is the noun, and smartest is describing what kind of student she is. So smartest is the adjective. Shakespeare has been credited for adding hundreds of new words to the English language when he was writing, and many of those were adjectives. Some examples of Shakespearean adjectives are, thou cold-blooded slave, hast thou not spoke like thunder on my side, been sworn my soldier, bidding me depend upon thy stars, thy fortune and thy strength, and dost thou now fall over to my fours? Cold-blooded is an adjective that describes the slave. It helps us to know what type of person the slave was. Cold-blooded is a word that had been used to describe snakes and reptiles, but Shakespeare used it for the first time to describe a person. Here's an example from the book Little Women. She remembered her mother's promise and, slipping her hand under her pillow, drew out a little crimson-covered book. Crimson-covered describes the color of fabric that was covering the book. As you can see, using adjectives can make your sentences and ideas come to life. Instead of just saying that the firework display was beautiful, you can make it much more exciting and easier to envision what the fireworks actually looked like by saying, the fireworks this year were bursting brightly overhead as the bright, dazzling sparkles lit up the sky. Bright and dazzling are just two of the many, many adjectives that make writing so descriptive and fun to read.
Describing situations in detail helps readers more vividly understand what is taking place. When describing things in more detail, adverbs are a helpful addition to make your sentences more colorful and portray the event clearly. In this video, we'll take a look at what adverbs do, how to identify them, and how to best use them in our writing. Let's get started. The easiest way to find an adverb in a sentence is to ask these questions. Where was something done? When was it done? How was it done? And to what extent was it done? An adverb will always answer one of those questions. For example, the adverb here answers the question, where? And the adverb randomly answers the question, how? An easy identifier for adverbs is the suffix ly. Not all adverbs use it, but the majority of adverbs do. Let's identify some adverbs by using our 4 questions. She went outside and walked the dog. Do any of those words in the sentence answer the question where, when, how, or to what extent? In this example, we see that outside is the adverb because it tells us where she went. Let's look at another. They briskly jogged through the park. Here, we see that the word briskly answers the question how something was done, making it the adverb in the sentence. Let's try one more example. She almost tripped while jogging, but regained her balance. This one might be tricky. In this example, we see that almost describes the extent to which something happens, which in this case was tripped. She almost tripped, making almost the adverb here. Adverbs not only modify verbs, they are also used to describe comparisons of 2 things. Adverbs have 3 degrees of comparison: positive, comparative, and superlative. The best way to explain positive, comparative, and superlative adverbs is to think of them as well, better, and best. When we want to describe the quality of something, we can say the thing itself is done well. That would be a positive adverb. We may compare that thing to something else and say, this thing is better than something else, which is known as a comparative adverb. Or we may simply say, this thing is the best, which is superlative. As you can see, with each comparison, the degree of its descriptor is increased. There are many ways of changing adverbs from positive to comparative and superlative. Let's go over each one with real examples and see how they differ. What's important to note about positive adverbs is that the words used don't necessarily have to be positive or good words. For example, the word badly is a positive adverb because it is the first or basic degree you can use to describe something without comparing it to anything else. Many adverbs can be modified to show different degrees by simply adding er or est to the end of the word. Adding er to a word makes it comparative, meaning it's not the most of something, but it is more than something else. Adding est to the end of a word means that the word it is describing is the most of something, and nothing can be compared as being better than it. Here's an example. He ran through the field faster than his sister. In this example, the adverb faster responds to the question of how something was done. We also know this is a comparative adverb because of the added er to the end of fast. This lets us know that this person ran at a higher speed compared to his sister. Here's another example. She was the quickest of everyone who ran the 5K. Here we see the adverb quickest answers the question of how something was done. Because there is an est at the end of quick, we know that this adverb is superlative because no one else ran more quickly than this person. Some adverbs, especially those that end in ly, can't have their degrees increased to comparative or superlative forms by simply adding er or est to the end. These adverbs must have more and most preceding the word to be modified. Let's look at a few examples. The crowd cheered for her more joyfully than for the other performers. Here we can see that joyfully is the adverb because it answers the question of how the crowd cheered. We can also see that joyfully is a comparative adverb because of the word more before it. With this, we know that the crowd cheered more, but not the most joyfully. He completed his task most efficiently of all the employees. Again, in this example, the adverb efficiently is easy to spot, not only because it ends in ly, but because it answers the question of how the task was performed. We also find the word most preceding efficiently, which means this is a superlative adverb and no task was completed more efficiently than his. Some adverbs can't be made comparative and superlative with the use of er, est, more, or most. For irregular adverbs, changing their degree of comparison means changing the word and its spelling entirely. There is no special trick to these irregular adverbs, so they must be memorized over time to understand their implied degree of comparison. The word badly is an example of an irregular adverb. To make it comparative, you wouldn't say more badly or badlier. The comparative form of badly is worse, and the superlative form is worst. Other examples of irregular adverbs include little, which becomes less and least, and good, which becomes better and best. Now, let's look at adverbial phrases. Adverbial phrases perform the same function as adverbs and describe when, how, to what extent, and where something happens. What makes them different from normal adverbs is they are phrases, which means they are a group of two or more words and they don't always contain a typical ly adverb in the phrase. Here are some examples that answer the question, when. He goes camping every summer. They are going to sleep earlier than usual. Here, these highlighted phrases signify a time in which something occurs. In this sentence, he was driving haphazardly and recklessly. This adverbial phrase is made up of two adverbs and a conjunction to make a phrase that describes how something occurred. An adverbial clause is similar to an adverbial phrase. However, adverbial clauses, just like the name suggests, are clauses, which means they contain a subject, verb, and subordinating conjunction. Let's look at some examples. Sit at the table until your food is eaten. In this example, the adverbial clause, until your food is eaten, describes when something occurs. We also know it is a clause because it has a subject, food, and verb, eaten, as well as a subordinating conjunction, until. My sister, although she was hungry, wouldn't eat until I arrived. Here, the adverbial clause starts with a subordinating conjunction, although has a subject, she, and a verb, is. Together, they describe the extent to which the sister wouldn't eat. Make sure you are polite to people wherever you go. This example shows the subordinating conjunction wherever, the subject you, and verb go, to show when something happened. Before we go, let's do a little practice to refresh what we've learned. Number 1, which of the following are not adverbs? A, entirely, B, rather, C, them, or D, cautiously. The answer is C, them. The word them is a pronoun. Number 2, the highlighted word is an example of what? Some people agree that Serena Williams is the greatest athlete of all time. A, adverbial phrase, B, subordinating conjunction, C, comparative adverb, or D, superlative adverb. The answer is D, superlative.
Prepositions are words that specify how something is related to something else in time and space. They work in a sentence to connect nouns or pronouns with other words and elements. Let's start with this example. The dog swam in the lake. There are two nouns in this sentence, dog and lake. We know from the verb swam what the dog is doing, but we need the preposition in to tell us where the swimming is happening. The dog is swimming in something, and that something is the lake. The second noun connected with the preposition, in this case the word lake, is called the object of the preposition, and together with the preposition forms a prepositional phrase. There is no subject in the phrase in the lake, only a noun. Because of the preposition in, we know it's a prepositional phrase. This is an article, not a noun, so we know it can't be the object of the preposition. Lake, the noun we are trying to connect with our first noun, dog, is the object of the preposition. Most of the time, though, not always, the object of the preposition comes after the preposition in the prepositional phrase. When we're trying to find the prepositional phrase in a sentence, first try to spot the preposition. Prepositions show direction, location, or time. Many of the most common prepositions are small words you use every day. At, by, for, from, in, of, on, to, and with are all prepositions. Think about this sentence and try to pick out the prepositional phrase. After work, Joe drove to the store in his car. There are 3 prepositional phrases in this sentence. Let's start with a simple one. Joe, the proper noun, is connected to the noun store by the preposition to. It answers a directional question. Where did Joe go? He went to the store. The word store is the object of the prepositional phrase to the store. Let's look for another preposition in this sentence. You might have noticed our preposition in appeared again in this sentence. In isn't a directional preposition like to, but it tells us where Joe was during his drive. He was in his car. Car is the object of the preposition in, and in his car is the prepositional phrase. Now, let's look back to the first word in the sentence, after. This is also a preposition. Remember, prepositions show direction, location, or time. After dinner is a prepositional phrase that tells us when Joe went to the store. Dinner is the object of the preposition. Not all prepositional phrases are quite so simple. Think of it like a sandwich. You have to have bread and filling to make a sandwich, right? A sandwich can be as simple as cheese between 2 slices of bread, but it can also have meat, veggies, and spreads. We can jazz up prepositional phrases the same way with adjectives and adverbs. As long as you still have the bread and the filling, preposition and object of the preposition, you'll still have a prepositional phrase. Take this sentence, for example. The swallows flew over the trees near the lake. Over the trees and near the lake are the 2 prepositional phrases in this sentence. Over is a preposition that tells us the direction the swallows flew, and near is a preposition that tells us where the trees were located. These prepositional phrases are fairly simple, but look what happens if we make the sandwich more interesting. The swallows flew over the dark trees near the town's renowned lake. We still have the same 2 prepositions and prepositional phrases, but the words dark, towns, and renowned are all adjectives. Dark is modifying or adding meaning to the object, trees, of the first prepositional phrase, but it is otherwise not changing the preposition in any way. The same is true of towns and renowned. They are modifying the object of the preposition lake. In the second phrase, near is still the preposition and lake is still the object of the preposition. So let's recap. A preposition is a word that answers the question when or where something happened in a sentence. It connects nouns or pronouns to other nouns in the sentence. About, to, with, up, down, under, inside, after, before, and for are a few examples of common prepositions. The object of the preposition is the noun that the preposition is talking about, and together with the preposition, those objects make prepositional phrases. Do you have hair that flows like a waterfall, or a hair that is as curly as a corkscrew? Are your eyes as blue as the ocean, or are your eyes brown like chocolate? These descriptions are all similes. Similes that may describe you. But what are similes exactly, and how are they used? Similes are a type of figurative language. Figurative language uses figures of speech to make written and verbal communication more effective, easier to understand, and more striking. Similes are a specific type of figurative language called imagery. There are several different types of imagery, but we'll stick with similes for this video. Similes use the words like or as to compare two unlike things. This comparison helps to bring out different qualities in the words, helping the audience to see the words in new ways. Some examples of similes used in everyday speech are, he is as strong as an ox. She can swim like a fish. The first simile uses the word as to compare a man to an ox. By comparing a man to an ox, you get the full impact of his strength. It would otherwise be flat and boring if you just said he was very strong. The second simile uses the word like to compare a woman to a fish. By doing this, you get a picture of how well she swims that a simple "she's a good swimmer" would not quite convey. Similes do not have to compare people to animals. There are many similes that compare a person to an object, or even one object to another. The clean tablecloth was as white as snow. The new car drove like a dream. As you can see, these items are not people or animals, but instead objects. However, these similes still use the word like or as to compare two unlike items. Having the word as appear twice in a simile can be confusing. It can be hard to tell what is being compared. Just remember to look for the noun in the sentence. What or who is being described? Comparing the tablecloth's color to snow helps the audience to see how white and clean it really is. Similes that use the word like are a bit easier. Driving the car is a positive experience, like a good dream. That comparison can evoke thoughts of a smooth ride, a fast drive, or even the wind blowing in your hair as you cruise along the beach. Such a simple simile can bring together so many new ideas. Similes are not just used in speech, however. Songs often use similes as well to make comparisons and draw attention to images and ideas, like the song Flying Trapeze by Alfred Lee and George Laybourne. Once I was happy, but now I'm forlorn, like an old coat that is tattered and torn. The writer of this song used the word like to compare being forlorn to an old coat. As silly as the song is, the image of the tattered and torn coat really helps to bring the depression of the singer to life. Without similes, many songs would seem lifeless and dull. Similes are also often used in poetry. In the poem A Red, Red Rose, Robert Burns uses a simile to describe his love. Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. My love is like the melody that's sweetly played in tune. By comparing his love to both a rose, which is a symbol of love in many cultures, and also to a sweet melody, you get much more out of the poem than just love. The rose gives you color, red, the sweet scent of a rose, the soft velvetiness of its petals, and maybe even the sting of the rose's thorns. Like a rose, love can be complex and much more than just pretty. Melodies in music also have connotations of their own. Played in tune gives you an indication that things are going smoothly. Novels also use similes to bring characters and settings to life. An example of this occurs in Jane Austen's book, Pride and Prejudice. The main love interest, Darcy, says, "I have been used to consider poetry as the food of love." By comparing poetry to food, you can see the importance he places on it. It is much more impactful to the reader than the character just stating that he finds poetry important in romance. This also helps to give us insight into his personality, making him a deeper, more well-rounded character. As you can see, similes help to make language more colorful and easier to understand. Similes help bring new color and life into mundane objects. They are an important part of songs, poetry, and even everyday speech. What similes do you use in your day-to-day speech? Or how can you spot similes in the things that you read or listen to? All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Shakespeare's words have a ring of truth, even though they might not be literally true. Metaphors like this one help bring ideas to life. But what is a metaphor? Metaphors are a type of figurative language. Figurative language uses figures of speech to make written and verbal communication more effective, easier to understand, and more striking. Metaphors are a specific type of figurative language called imagery. There are 7 types of imagery in figurative language. Similes, metaphors, and allusions use non-literal comparisons that illuminate ideas. Personification uses a non-literal comparison exclusively to a person, as in, the leaf danced across the lawn. Alliteration, assonance, and onomatopoeia use sounds to create different feelings in the audience than the literal words would normally convey. Getting back to our specific topic, metaphors are words or phrases that compare 2 things. Unlike a simile, they do not use the words like or as to compare the words. Instead, they state that one thing is another thing. Like in the quote from Shakespeare, "The world is a stage." Metaphors are used in literature, movies, plays, and even in day-to-day speech. You might even find yourself using metaphors without realizing it. Some commonly used metaphors include, love is a battlefield, there's a blanket of clouds, time is a thief, he's a night owl. All these examples compare 2 things directly. Love is compared to a battle, clouds are compared to blankets, time is compared to a thief, and man is compared to an owl. Of course, we know that a man is not literally an owl, but the comparison helps us to visualize things in a much more vibrant way. How boring would it be to say he likes to stay up late at night on a consistent basis? Other types of metaphors use indirect comparisons. A couple of examples include, work has dried up. Their ideas are difficult to swallow. In these metaphors, you have 2 steps in the comparison. In the first example, work is not being compared to dried up, but rather to something that can be dried up. You can use your imagination to fill in the comparison. Maybe an empty swimming pool or a dry desert oasis. Similarly, ideas are not being swallowed. Ideas are being compared to something that you eat that is hard to swallow. Maybe a dry cracker or a peanut butter sandwich. This type of indirect comparison allows someone to fill in an image with personal experiences. Maybe you've never been to a desert, but you have gone through a hot, dry summer. Maybe you've never eaten a peanut butter sandwich, but you have had to swallow a big pill. Making images personal helps draw you into the story and makes it that much more visceral. Here are some examples of metaphors outside of everyday speech. In the poem The Tiger by William Blake, he expounds on the beauty and danger of the wild tiger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright, in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? The first line of the poem says the tiger is burning bright. Of course, the tiger is not literally on fire, but this comparison is used as a metaphor to illustrate the tiger's bright color and even the tiger's dangerous nature. Like getting burned by a fire, the tiger can be a dangerous beast. In the novel A Little Princess, the author Frances Hodgson Burnett wrote, "She looked as if she had never had quite enough to eat. Her very eyes were hungry." As you can see, metaphors help make language more colorful and easier to understand by bringing new color and life into common objects and ideas. Hi, and welcome to this video about predictive reading. Today, we'll explain what predictive reading is, the importance of predictive reading, and walk you through some easy examples that will give you better insight into this strategy. So, What is predictive reading? Predictive reading is exactly what it sounds like. Readers use their own experiences and understanding of what they're currently reading to predict what comes next. Let's break that down a little further. Readers use everything they read to help make their predictions. Everything means titles, pictures, written word, and diagrams. For example, let's say you're reading about the price of milk. You remember reading in the past that the price of milk has increased, but your current reading notes that it continues to cost more and more to produce a gallon of milk. You can reasonably predict that the price of milk will continue increasing. By carefully reading and analyzing content, the reader can predict what's about to happen. Why is predictive reading important? Predictive reading helps readers improve a number of skills they'll find useful in all walks of life. Let's take a look at some of them. Predictive reading helps with focus. To understand what you're reading, you have to focus on each word and piece of punctuation. You can't skim. You not only have to understand what you're reading, but connect current reading to what you've learned in the past. Predictive reading helps with that recall. You have to remember what you've previously read and use that information to help inform your predictions. Predictive reading helps you think ahead and anticipate. You focused on the reading and you understand it. You've used recall to remember pieces of information. Now it's time to think ahead and anticipate what comes next. Comprehension and recall mean you have the tools to make a reasonable prediction and anticipate what happens next. Predictive reading also helps with revision strategies. Maybe your prediction wasn't correct. Using the milk example, let's say you predicted milk prices would drop, but they did in fact increase. You can review what you've read, reevaluate how you came to your conclusion, and revise it. Those are just a few of the benefits of predictive reading. Now, let's examine some of the clues you can look for when making reading predictions. There are a number of aspects of writing that provide clues to help you make reasonable reading predictions. For example, a book's title provides clues. You know Harry Potter books will be about Harry Potter just by reading the title, so that's an easy one. The book's cover art might also provide clues when the title doesn't. Let's take James Bradley, Flags of Our Fathers. At first glance, that title may not give a clue, but one look at the photo tells you what the book is about. It's the iconic photo of 6 men pushing an American flag up a hill in war, so you know it's about Iwo Jima in World War II. The table of contents can also provide clues based on the names of a chapter. Prologues can foreshadow information. Illustrations can provide clues based on what they show. So here's a predictive reading example and how you can use all of the information we've talked about to make a prediction. Here's the title of a book, When We Lost Our Innocence. The book cover contains one photo each of former President John F. Kennedy, civil rights icon Martin Luther King, and former U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. From looking at the clues in the title and the cover photo, what predictions could you make? There could be several. All 3 men were assassinated between 1963 and 1968. So you could predict the book will be about how the deaths of these leaders sent America into a spiral of chaos and despair. The 1960s was also a time when the country became ensnared in an unpopular Vietnam War and African Americans were fighting for their civil rights. You could predict the book examines how the deaths of these 3 men left a leadership void at a time the country needed it most. Now that you've formed a preliminary prediction, you start reading the book. You use recall to refer to information you've read, and if you see your prediction was incorrect, you revise it based on new knowledge. As you could probably guess, detective novels are one of the most famous methods of predictive reading. There's always a detective trying to solve a crime. There are clues throughout the book that can help you determine the identity of the bad guy. With these novels, you really have to focus because the bad guy is rarely the person you think it is. That's predictive reading, the process of taking information and predicting what's to come. The predicting part is always fun, but the ability to focus, recall information, think ahead, and revise are all valuable skills.
Whether it's a simple tale, like The Three Little Pigs, or a long-winded play like The Tragedy of Hamlet, a well-told story will always have a defined plot. A plot is the sequence of main events in a story. These events generally take place in a specific order, which gives the story a specific structure. This structure can be divided into 5 basic elements: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and the resolution. Let's take a look at each of these. The exposition, or beginning, of a plot sets the scene. It is the part of a story where the writer builds the world, sets the time frame, and introduces characters to help the reader understand when and where things are taking place. The rising action of a plot is where the story begins to develop. Conflicts are introduced that complicate the lives of the character and create suspense. These tensions can be a cause of excitement or crisis as the characters deal with the conflict put in front of them. The climax of a plot is when the tensions or actions have reached their peak and characters have reached a turning point in the story. From this point on, the reader is left to wonder what will happen next and if the tensions will be resolved. The falling action of a plot occurs once the conflict from the onset of the story begins to resolve itself. Finally, the resolution of a plot is the last element to take place. The resolution is the conclusion of the story, which can be happy, tragic, or open for interpretation. Regardless, a well-written conclusion will make it clear that the story has come to an end. These are elements that storytellers have used for centuries. Back in 335 BC, Greek philosopher Aristotle wrote a book called Poetics, which talked about his theories about drama and storytelling. According to Aristotle, plots played a major role in the structure of poetry and tragedies during his time. In fact, to him, the plot, or mythos, was the most important element in a tragedy. He claims the plot should move from beginning to middle, then to the end in an organized sequence where the beginning doesn't pick up from any previous event, and the end ties up all loose threads within the story. Aristotle also believed there were 2 types of plots, simple and complex. Simple plots are a unified construct of probable actions with a change in fortune. This can be seen clearly in most cliché horror movie plots. Friends go on a road trip, car runs out of gas, friends find old house when searching for help, friends explore old house, someone gets attacked, friends fight for survival, someone gets away. There's a chain of cause and effect events in this simple plot that move the story forward. However, a complex plot will have what's known as a reversal of fortune, or a recognition in the story. A reversal of fortune is a pivotal point of the story where the protagonist experiences a change from being secure to being vulnerable. Recognition is a moment of insight where the protagonist understands their place in the larger story. An example of this can be seen in the character Macbeth from the play of the same name by William Shakespeare. Macbeth went from a content and quiet aristocrat to an overly ambitious and tyrannical king. This tyranny arose from the belief that, according to a prophecy, no one born of a woman could defeat him. This was a reversal in the plot. Because he took the prophecy literally, he felt invincible. That is, until Macduff, who Shakespeare describes as being born via C-section, appears here. It's here Macbeth realizes the prophecy did not make him invincible, and he is defeated by Macduff. This is an example of recognition for both Macbeth and Macduff, who realize their places within the story as the conflict between them is resolved. Okay, now that we've learned what plots are, let's look at a quick review question to test your memory. Which of the following are the correct elements of a plot and are in the correct order? A. Climax, falling action, exposition, rising action, resolution. B. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. C. Exposition, elevation, climax, falling action, and the end. Or D. Exposition, rising action, highlight, falling action, and the resolution. The correct answer is B.
Separating fact from opinion can be a difficult task. In this video, we will discuss the distinction between fact and opinion and offer some helpful tips for distinguishing between the two. A fact is a statement that can be proven to be true by the use of evidence. Factual statements are true in all cases and for all people. In other words, facts are universal. Some examples include dogs are mammals. Albany is the capital of New York. Mount Everest is the tallest mountain on Earth. Each of these statements is true. Furthermore, each statement is verifiable and not debatable, provided that definitions are agreed upon. Put simply, evidence exists that could potentially prove or disprove each claim. Opinions, unlike facts, are neither true nor false. An opinion can express a belief, attitude, value, judgment, or feeling. Some examples include, dogs are the best mammals in existence. Albany is the most interesting city in New York. World War II was a terrible war. Each of these statements expresses an opinion. Note that each is debatable. In other words, one can potentially agree or disagree with. Debate, a statement of opinion. Note that the final statement, World War II was a terrible war, strikes many of us as factual. However, this is a statement of opinion. Yes, most people would consider World War II terrible. However, there is always the possibility that somebody out there holds a different opinion, as strange as they may seem. It is very rare for a statement with a value word like terrible to be factual. Now that we know the differences between a fact and an opinion, it's important to know how to distinguish between them when reading literature. Let's look at some helpful strategies. Watch for opinion masked as fact. A lot of times, professional or technical language can seem factual. In particular, you'll want to watch out for predictions. Predictions are opinions since they cannot be verified in the present. This is even true if the prediction is being expressed by an expert with an informed opinion. A zoologist who predicts that a particular animal will go extinct in 50 years, for example, is stating an informed opinion. This opinion is based on evidence, research, and expertise, but because it cannot be presently confirmed, it is not a fact. Value or judgment words often signal an opinion. LeBron James is very tall is a statement most people would agree with. However, the word very makes this problematic. What exactly does it mean to be very tall? It is not defined. What one person considers very tall, another may consider average or even short. The word very is an example of a value or judgment word. Here's a list of value and judgment words. If you see one of these in a statement, then the view being expressed is likely an opinion. Look for words like should or ought to. These words usually suggest a course of action or give advice. Though this advice may be advisable, it is rarely factual. No matter how much we agree with a should statement, it is by its very nature opinion. For instance, one should avoid smoking cigarettes. May be sound advice with a lot of supporting evidence, but it is still an opinion. Smoking cigarettes can cause a variety of health ailments, on the other hand, can be verified and is therefore factual. In essence, facts can be verified by evidence, and opinions are statements of belief, attitude, value, judgment, or feeling. Before we go, let's look at a quick review question. Which of the following statements is factual? A. Ohio is a beautiful state. B. You should never drive faster than the speed limit. C. George Washington was the first president of the United States. Or D. George Washington was a great public speaker. The answer is C. This is the only option that can be backed up by evidence. Thanks for watching and happy studying.